aprovechamiento ganadero, como dije antes. Proponemos añadir una definición así del sistema en ese reglamento como sistema agroforestal que combina el componente leñoso con el agrícola y ganadero y que se incluya en esos artículos del 22 al 26 que esas ayudas se concederán a los titulares de sistemas agroforestales. Bueno, además, solamente una cuestión más, esas modificaciones son puntuales, nos gustaría que se tuvieran en cuenta dentro del reglamento Omnibus que ahora se está tratando, pero creemos que esto solamente es un parche y nos gustaría que se empezase a hablar ya de la dehesa más allá del 2020. Que hubiera un régimen de pagos directos con financiación suficiente para su conservación y mantenimiento dentro del primer pilar, debido a que se trata de explotaciones agrarias de muy baja productividad, pero de una elevada rentabilidad medioambiental. Debe ser considerada admisible toda la superficie arbustiva, arbórea y arable de la dehesa sin ningún tipo de descuento. Debe condicionarse cualquier pago en estas explotaciones a la actividad ganadera extensiva y sostenible, con cargas adecuadas, porque desgraciadamente lo de las cargas también es otra polémica. La PAC ha hecho mucho daño a la dehesa porque en un determinado momento se fomentó unas cargas ganaderas que no eran sostenibles con las dehesas. La dehesa aguanta una carga ganadera muy baja si no se regenera. Cuando se daban ayudas por cabeza de ganado de una forma incontrolada y se aplicaban cargas ganaderas de Europa, del norte de Europa al sur de Europa, eso ha hecho mucho daño al ecosistema de la dehesa. Debemos de mantener cargas ganaderas bajas. También tenemos que establecer un sistema de pago verde vinculado al mantenimiento de prácticas agrarias que redunden en la mejora del ecosistema. El greening no le hace bien a nuestro ecosistema. Nuestro ecosistema no es compatible con ese greening que se ha inventado. No tiene nada que ver. Ese sistema de rotación, los cultivos a 3 hojas, con leguminosas de forma exclusiva o con... no tienen nada que ver y además hacen daño a nuestra dehesa. Por tanto, tenemos que hacer un sistema de pago verde vinculado al mantenimiento de prácticas que redunden en la mejora como son densificación del arbolado, reposición de pies muertos, regeneración, mejora de pastos, rotaciones, revileos, siembra de leguminosas mezcladas con cereales. Eso debe de ser. Solamente me queda un poquito que debemos fomentar la inversión en explotaciones mediante ayudas dirigidas a la mejora de la gestión de las mismas, construcciones de manejo, almacenamiento de agua, cercas y accesos, para poder controlar la fauna doméstica y salvaje, separarla. Estamos teniendo muchísimos problemas de sanidad animal como consecuencia del crecimiento incontrolado de especies cinegéticas. Aprobar una estrategia integral de conservación de las dehesas ibéricas, abordando también los problemas de sanidad vegetal, y reconocer la dehesa como motor de desarrollo rural en comarcas desfavorecidas, potenciando los oficios tradicionales, el reconocimiento de productos de calidad que de ellas se obtienen, incorporar nuevas tecnologías que hagan que estas explotaciones sean más eficientes, que garanticen su continuidad. En estas zonas es necesario fijar la población mediante una economía verde, que es estrategia de la Junta de Extremadura, y una economía ligada íntimamente a la dehesa. En el Senado hoy se presentó una ponencia importante sobre la dehesa que acabó diciendo que la dehesa constituye un ecosistema absolutamente peculiar dentro del ámbito de Europa, al ofrecer una altísima biodiversidad, proporciona un importante acervo de valores medioambientales, culturales y estéticos. Los bienes públicos de disfrute paisajístico y de diversidad cultural y otros ambientales son valores económicos públicos, a los que se suele atribuir gran importancia en la dehesa. Este ecosistema debe ser protegido precisamente por estos valores y la sociedad no puede permanecer impasible ante su posible quiebra, y menos aún, añado yo, los poderes públicos. Así que nada, muchas gracias por su atención.
Muchas gracias, Yolanda. Como veis, bien estudiado lo tienen, y bien, yo creo que has visto todos los aspectos y ha sido muy interesante, Yolanda. Se ve el trabajo que hace el Gobierno de Extremadura sobre estos ecosistemas y esperamos que esto vaya a mejor. Ahora le voy a dar sin más dilación la palabra al representante de la DG AGRI. También nos va a poner un PowerPoint, el señor Berlín. Un momentito.
Yes, thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm Eric Berling. My name is Eric Berling. I'm coming from DG AGRI. I'm working in a unit dealing with greening and cross-compliance in particular, but also more generally direct payments. So my presentation will be quite focused on the CAP instruments which are relevant to woody pastures in general, not only DSI, but of course DSI is a prominent example of this kind of ecosystem. I will try to explain a bit the rationale of the instruments and how they are functioning in a nutshell, so as to avoid any misunderstanding. We are well aware that there are discussions, long-standing exchanges between various member states and Spain in particular about the woody pastures. But I would like to, let's say, explain a bit better the CAP instruments, so as everybody can speak on the same ground. I'm sorry for those who knows already quite well the CAP instruments. My presentation will be organized in 3 parts. So first, setting the scene, what do we call woody pasture, because of course it needs to be defined, specified, so that we are talking of the same thing, and on Europe-wide, not only in Spain. And then I will go through along the various instruments, the various CAP instruments, and in particular the 3, let's say, categories of main CAP instruments, which are direct payments, rural developments, and cross-cutting instruments, and I will speak of, in particular, cross-compliance and advisory system. And then we will finish with a short outlook of what can happen in the near future in the discussion on the reform of the CAP. First, if we speak of woody pasture, I think everybody acknowledges that it's a valuable landscape, it's a valuable ecosystem, it's a valuable agro-ecosystem. It's part of agroforestry systems, which are well known for having various environmental benefits, and in particular, there are specific agro-ecosystems which support the production of very typical products on process. So, for instance, the cerdo ibérico, and the extensive sheep farming in Western Europe or Northern Europe. Mountain sheep farming is also a good example. Woody pastures have also biodiversity beneficial impacts. In particular, they are good habitats for plants and animal species, and I think it was well illustrated before in the previous presentation. Climate change is also a benefit of these agroecosystems through carbon sequestration in grass and trees. Soil is also benefiting from this kind of ecosystem through the limited soil work, generally associated with this production, this kind of production, and also the complementary use of different soil layers, in particular through the trees and which exploit deep layers of the soil, and the grass, which are more superficial. Water also benefit from these systems through limited use of input. So normally there is no irrigation in these agroecosystems. They are also protecting against runoff, in particular in Mediterranean regions. And also they form cultural landscapes which are very valued, which are really typical of certain regions, and this, of course, is a very, very good example. But it's also the case in Nordic woody pastures or alpine pastures, or even maki in the Mediterranean regions. So they form overall a very diverse landscape across Europe, very different kind of woody pastures. For the, let's say, the most typical and not problematic one, we have, of course, DSA Montado in Portugal, DSA in Spain and Montado in Portugal. We have also the woody pastures in Sweden. Here is an example in Sweden. which is also quite typical and very valued in this country. In alpine regions, we have typical landscapes with semi-wooded pastures, forest and pastures altogether. And this is an example in France, in Normandy, where you have also this kind of landscape. But sometimes it's clear that there are situations which are more complex to manage from a CAP point of view. And we will maybe specify that a bit further in the next section. You have, for instance, these situations where you have clear-cut grassland parcels, but which are progressively becoming forest if you go a bit apart. You have more, let's say, more confused situation where you have mainly shrubs and trees, where, of course, that can be grazed, but the situation is, I would say, less clear than previously. And then you have also the forest margins, the forest edges, where, of course, the trees growing, then you have the limit between what we would consider as a pasture and what we would consider as a forest is becoming unclear, and that will be, I suppose, a key point in the discussion. And of course, landing to the most extreme cases, this is Maki in Corsica, I think, where you have really a predominance, if not only shrubs and trees. Now, if we look at the CAP, how it is organized, what are the instruments? I would like to present the instruments through an entry of environment, because I think it's quite relevant here. The CAP instruments are working in a complementary way altogether. So if we have the area and the added environmental benefit, then the first layer of the CAP instruments, or even further of the policy instruments, are with the legislation. Here we speak of the environmental legislation. So relevant to DSR wooded pasture are the Natura 2000 directives and a set of good agricultural and environmental conditions. I will specify further. Those rules are not the CAP, but they are linked to the CAP payments through cross-compliance. And because it's a law, we don't pay for that. That's the principle. The next layer, still, if we consider the environmental point of view of the CAP, are the green direct payments. So the direct payment in general, but more specifically the green direct payments. So which set let's say, which have the objective of supporting agriculture through hectare payments, and in particular with the greening, with the green direct payment for green purposes. And on top of that, we have the rural development measures, which are on their side voluntary measures for farmers. The farmers commit to contracts for these measures, and they are on top of the two previous layers. If we look at the area covered, they are de facto, the area covered are going, let's say, decreasing if we go to more ambitious measures. The rural development measures are being the ones which are the most ambitious in terms of environment. And on top of that, we have some horizontal instruments which are supporting all this scheme through research, advice, and innovation partnership, which is a new instrument in the CAP. Now, if we look one by one of each CAP instrument, then first let's take the direct payments, which are let's say the basic layer of the CAP. Of course, most of the budget is under direct payments. These are income support, which are decoupled from production or possibly coupled. And what is very important is that the decoupled direct payments are based on the basis of area declared, and they are paid on agricultural area for active farmers. So, in short, direct payments are for farming activity, farmland and farming activity. What do we call farmland? Farmland needs, of course, to be defined in the CAP because we pay on the basis of that, of hectares of agricultural land. And there are three categories of farmland. Farmland is subdivided into three categories. Arable land, permanent crops, and permanent grassland. So there cannot be other area than one of these. So all agricultural land needs to fulfill fulfill definition or to fill in the box of one of the three categories. Now, if we take permanent grassland is defined in the CAP. It's an area covered by grass and herbaceous forage, which is outside the rotation during 5 years. So the idea is that if you have a rotation, it's arable land. A rotation of less than 5 years is arable land. If there is no change of the cover, the land cover during 5 years, grass, herbaceous forage, it's a permanent grassland. That's how the CAP has defined for a long time the three categories. But the definitions have been significantly changed during the last CAP reform, 2013, including sometimes elements which were already implemented through guidelines or through various statements by the Commission, but now everything is in the new definition. So the concept of permanent grassland has been enlarged in the last reform to include shrub and trees which are accessible to animals and grazable and can be grazed. The definition specifies that grass should be predominant. However, member states may include as permanent grassland in the eligible land parcels where the grass is not predominant, but they have to, because of traditional use of the land, this is considered as permanent grassland. In this respect, member states are responsible for defining which trees and shrubs may be grazed and which trees and shrubs can be accessible by animals. Of course, it's something that we cannot define in European regulation. Several other management rules have been modified with the CAP reform, and in particular, I quote three which are relevant for the issue we are discussing today. The first one is that if a tree or any landscape feature is protected by the member states through the instrument Good Agricultural and Environmental Conditions, the GAC, then this element is considered as eligible when it is on the area of an agricultural parcel. So a tree in the middle of an agricultural parcel is fully eligible, the area of a tree is fully eligible when it is protected through the GAC. This is an old rule, but which has been carried over and specified further in the reform. Another rule is so-called 100 trees rule, which says that a parcel with a density less than 100 scattered trees per hectare is entirely eligible to direct payments, provided that the agricultural activity is not hampered by the trees. Member states so the 100 trees per hectare is a maximum. Of course, member states may set a lower limit if they want, but the regulation is now clear on that. This rule was already existing before as a 50 trees per hectare rule, but only in a guideline, so this is now clear in the regulation with a higher threshold. And when it is fruit trees, the rule does not apply. Fruit trees, parcels with fruit trees are fully eligible. Alternatively, there is another rule, which is a pro rata rule. I think your previous presentation mentioned this rule several times. It's an alternative to the 100 trees rule, which says that for permanent grassland, member states may choose to deduct the ineligible feature by applying a pro rata. Those two rules, the 100 trees rule and the pro rata rules, are really aimed at defining the most clearly as possible what is an agricultural area and what is not, and what is in particular a forest area, if we look at the number of trees only. Because the reason is quite straightforward. Direct payments, again, pay for agricultural activity on farmland, on agricultural land. So the EU regulation must define what is, as far as possible, define what is an agricultural parcel, in particular in the case of woody pastures. But of course, member states have, as you can see, a toolbox to use to further define what they consider as an eligible parcel for direct payments or as an agricultural parcel through these various instruments. The direct payments schemes include also a specific scheme, I mentioned it before, the greening scheme or the green direct payment scheme, which said that 30% of the direct payments are conditioned to the respect of practices beneficial for environment and the climate change. And these practices are threefold: so crop diversification for arable land, and I understand it was also an issue for DSR from the previous presentation, sorry. The respect of 5% of ecological focus areas, an area which is devoted to, in particular, mainly biodiversity, and third element, which is the maintenance of permanent grassland. And this maintenance of permanent grassland is set at two levels. At the national, regional level, member states shall ensure that the ratio of permanent grassland does not decrease by more than 5% compared to the total agricultural area. And I think this is relevant also for woody pastures and DSR, which are falling in majority in this category of permanent grassland. And for very specific, very valuable, environmentally valuable permanent grassland, the so-called environmentally sensitive permanent grassland, so in particular the one which are situated in Natura 2000 areas, then there is a full protection. The farmers are prevented to plow this permanent grassland, and this is clearly with a biodiversity objective. Now the upper layer of the CAP, if we can say so, in terms of ambition, of environmental ambition, is rural development. And rural development is also very relevant for woody pastures. This policy, this second pillar of the CAP, includes a set of measures which have to be specified by member states in national or regional menus with the so-called rural development programs. This policy, the rural development policy, does not, and this is a very big difference with direct payments, does not only target farming activity on farmland, but also non-agricultural activity and on non-agricultural land. For instance, there are forestry measures in the rural development policy, and there is none in the direct payment policy, in the direct payment schemes. And among the rural development measures, some are very relevant, directly relevant to viticulture, in particular the establishment of agroforestry systems, the agro-environmental climate measures, and the measure for investments in physical assets. But of course, there are other measures such as advisory services, etc., which are also very relevant to viticulture. Examples in Spain, you know them and certainly better than me. Spain has included in its rural development program, in some regions of course, the selection, the planting, protection of trees, densification of dehesas, and also management practices like low stocking rate, grazing exclusion zones, and using a set of different measures, different rural development measures, and in particular the support to investments, the support to agroforestry system, and the agro-environmental climate measures. Now I will speak briefly of two cross-cutting instruments, cross-compliance and advice, and I will try to be brief, not to take too much on the discussion time. Cross-compliance is relevant to viticulture in that it is a link between CAP payments and the respect of certain rules, which comes basically from the legislation, from the non-CAP legislation, and in particular the Natura 2000 directive. So if an area is classified as a habitat, as a valuable habitat through Natura 2000, then the farmers must comply to certain management rules, and if they do not respect these management rules, and it is found during the control, then there may be a reduction of CAP payments under the system of cross-compliance. Cross-compliance includes also a set of the so-called, I mentioned it before, the good agricultural and environmental conditions, the GAC, and member state must define certain standards of GAC, and in particular, one standard must be defined by the member state, which must be defined by the member state, is protection of landscape features, and in particular trees, hedges, etc. So member states have to define what is valuable in the farm landscape to be protected. And then there is a full protection, and as I mentioned it before, this full protection, in exchange of this full protection, the area taken by the tree or the hedge or the group of trees is fully eligible to direct payments. Another cross-cutting instrument is a farm advisory system. Member states must set up this farm advisory system to offer advice to farmers on the different conditions and eligibility requirements of the CAP in particular, cross-compliance rules, rural development rules, greening, maintenance condition of the land, but also member states are free to add, if they want, other kind of advice, in particular in the sector, economical sector, so on the profitability of the farms, or the environmental issues which are linked to farming activity.
Señor, discúlpeme, debería ir finalizando, porque si no, no tenemos tiempo para la intervención.
Okay. So I was going to finish, and I will be very brief, because now if we see the outlook of the CAP, the Commission is clearly at this stage in a listening mode. It's what the Commissioner says very frequently. What is the context is different commitments inside or outside the Commission, and the Commission will take that into account. It's of course a Juncker priority, Juncker Commission priority, the 10th one, and in particular for, as far as it is relevant for us, climate and jobs and growth. The other commitments are the US Sustainable Development Goals, The core declaration last autumn, which on rural development, on the future of the rural development policy, the COP21 on climate change, of course, and the Commission is now in the process of a public consultation, which was open and which will last for 12 weeks. I think the last day is 2nd of May. And of course to all other contribution from outside, in particular through the civil dialogue group for the civil society, and of course the Council, the European Parliament, on all other studies. So everything will feed into the reflection of the Commission, which will come forward with an impact assessment and proposals for the simplification of the modernization of the CAP, and that will be in the course of the end of this year. So I put here some links, and of course the public consultation is open, and it's very timely now to contribute to this public consultation from all parts, I would say NGOs or governments or regions or all parties interested by the question, and the Commission will make the best use of all the contributions in this respect. So thank you very much, and I'm of course very pleased to reply